Hi everybody, today we're going to talk about trimming our bowls, and this is going to be an extension on the video about trimming our cylinders. Except with bowls, we're dealing with a little bit more thickness, and we're deciding now to maybe trim a foot ring. And what a foot ring is, we've done a little bit already with our hand-built projects, but a foot ring is this proud ring that we trim into the bottoms of our bowls. So it's going to remove a lot of mass. As you can see, the bottom here is pretty thick and undefined, and all we're doing is we're going to finish off what the interior shape looks like, and we're going to add that foot ring. The first few things to determine, and I'm going to do three things first, is I want to know how thick the floor is. So a straight edge, just like with our cylinders, across the rim, you make a mark, and then you come to the outside and you make another mark. So what I have here is about a 1/2 inch of clay that's right down in the center. That's a good thing to know. This will help us prevent the possibility of punching a hole through the bottom as we trim. So that's one thing. We want the center. How thick is the center? The next thing we want to know is how thick our wall is, and when does our wall start getting thicker. So I'm going to feel this, and I'm going to wait for my hands. I'm going to pay really close attention as I just feel the wall going up and down. I want to know when my hands start expanding as they get to the bottom. And as I get to the bottom here, I'm going to make a little mark. So that line right there is going to indicate to me that this is where the clay starts to get a little bit thicker as you move down the wall towards the bottom. So I have a good idea of where I could start trimming now. The other thing is I want to kind of give myself an idea of where I'm going to place the foot, so I'm not just guessing when I flip this upside down, because we can't really decide, or we can't see where these curves start when we flip it upside down. So it's a good idea to have an understanding of that before we flip it over. So what I'm looking at is the floor of this bowl, and when it starts to transition to the wall and where this curve actually is. Because the goal of a foot, really, yes, it does add some decorative element to the bottom, but it's also going to help support the wall, because there's a lot of mass and a lot of clay that needs to be supported by the foot. And if you put the foot too narrow, there's a possibility that your wall can collapse. So what we'll do is we'll think about where this curve transitions to the floor. For me, it's right here, and I'm going to try to visualize through the floor where that would be. So for me, I'm guessing right there. So I'm going to make another notch with my finger. So that's telling me where, when I flip this over now, and keep in mind, before we trim anything or before we take anything off the wheel, if we're just learning how to trim, it's a good idea to do yourself a little bit of favor and even off the rim before you remove it from the wheel, so that when you do flip it over, it's not wobbling. So having that all in mind, I'm going to set this upside down. I'm going to use the rings to help me get it towards the middle, and then we'll use our needle tool to help center this. So remember, with trimming, we're always focused on the area that we're trimming rather than the rim down at the bottom. So I'm going to focus right about here. So your eyeballs will do a pretty good job of getting it close to the middle, and now we'll just use our needle to get it even closer. So I like to mark where the line is, and then put the line in front of you and find the midpoint. So the midpoint's here. Then I'm going to give it a small nudge towards center, and then wipe the mark away. And then we just repeat this step until we are in the center. And remember, we're in the middle, or we know we're close to the middle when the line goes all the way around the piece. And each nudge should get progressively softer and softer because the adjustments are smaller as you get towards the middle. Okay, so now it's just barely off. So we're going all the way around now. Now I can secure it. Remember, at least 3 evenly spaced coils of clay, and you push the coil down into the wheel first, and then you snug it on the rim. Okay, so now I can make my marks. That first scratch I made, I'm just gonna make a line all the way around the piece. The foot ring, I'm gonna make a line all the way around the piece. So now I know I have a starting point and an ending point for where I could start trimming. Or I can start trimming my foot. This is giving me the dimension of the outside of my foot ring up here. So I have a 1/2 inch thick floor. Keeping in mind how a curve works, the bowl's gonna go this way. So as I go out, it should get deeper. So if this is a 1/2 inch thick, I'm gonna trim it to a 1/4 inch. And as I get wider, I'm gonna go a little bit further. So on this outside edge, I'm gonna go closer to maybe 3/8 of an inch, if not a full 1/2 inch on this curve. So I can do that first. I'm gonna go towards my line. And then I'm gonna start going down. And you can see, once I start establishing the height of my foot, it's indicating all the clay that can go away because I don't have a square edge on the inside of my bowl. It's a nice smooth transition. So I'm gonna make a nice smooth transition from this corner here to that line. So I should be able to cut all that corner off. We can also use our larger loop tool for this. If you like smooth lines or smooth trimming marks rather than the small gouge of those smaller tools. Okay, so we're almost done here. And now you can really get the sense that this is a bowl that has a tall foot. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take the time to do any sort of, adjustments to how I want the outside of this foot ring to look. I'm just gonna go for a straight wall with a corner down at the bottom here to keep things simple. But in general, the square edge of your trimming tool is gonna give you a real crisp corner like this. The round edges, you can make it a smooth transition, more similar to this little bowl that I have here. So you can see this one doesn't have a defined foot. It has more of a smooth transition from the rim all the way down to the bottom, whereas this one has a really crisp line. So once I'm done with the outside, I'm gonna move on to the inside. A general rule of thumb for your foot thickness is that to give yourself about the same amount of wall thickness as you are for the rest of the piece. That's going to really help with drying times, drying evenly, and the potential for cracks on the floor are going to be a lot less frequent just because the clay is already even. So we're thinking about even clay thickness, but you do also have some leniency there, and you can make it either thinner or thicker, but I would definitely caution you from making feet too thin, because they are a piece that's often abused on your pieces when you set them down on the countertops and tables. Okay, so now what I could do, I'm gonna punch straight down in the center to a 1/4 inch, because I know that this bowl has a 1/2 inch floor. So if I cut that in half, I remove any guesswork. So I don't have to guess how thick this is now, or how much material I have to remove from the middle later. Also, I'm gonna start removing from this inside corner, and I'm gonna go down slightly less than I did on the outside here, because we're thinking of a nice curve that starts from the peak at the top, or in the center of the foot, and then it just gradually makes its way down here. So it's gonna be slightly more shallow than the outside here. And now that I have these things all measured out, what I'm gonna do is just remove the mass that's here, because that doesn't belong there. So I could use that small tool, or I could again come to my larger loop tool. And once this visible indentation goes away, then I know that I've removed all the excess clay. And at this point, everything is purely cosmetic, so I could play with how, if I want these to be really clean corners on my foot, or if I wanted to round them off. Remember that rounded off corners are going to chip a lot less after the glaze firing. So if you just want to chamfer corners, I'm not removing a lot of mass, but I'm just making things just a little bit more visually appealing to myself. You know, just adjusting that outside just a little bit. And fine-tune the interior of this, but I would call this done at this point. What you always want to do anytime you trim something is just pick it up and feel it. And just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to cut this one in half. I'm going to go ahead and cut this in half, and hopefully have a decent example of the wall thickness. So you can see here, the wall, clean up my little cut edge because there's a flare there. So what I might have done is trimmed a little too much here, but that's going to be okay. You can see I have a 1/4 inch floor, and where this corner transition is, it's smooth all the way through. And you have a nice even foot thickness in relation to the wall thickness. So good luck with trimming, and send me any questions that you might be having. Bye everybody.